Review Committee is now in session, and first order of business will be to consider the minutes for April 22nd and 23rd. And do I have a motion? I have a motion and a second. Have a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, seeing none, motion passes. The next item for consideration is on the agenda is the discussion of the Pulaski County Detention Center and the Netflix docuseries Unlock a Jail Experiment. And I will mention that all of our witnesses are here voluntarily, and we will be taking sworn testimony. And our first witness, I believe, will be a Mr. Eric Higgins, Sheriff Eric Higgins. Sheriff Higgins. There he is. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, I will clear the room if I have any more outbursts like that. This is not a pep rally. And I have enough legal officials here that will remove the room if I have any more outbursts. Thank you. Sheriff Higgins, if you'll stand, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? And take your seat, state your name, please, and who's the gentleman next to you?
Mr. Chairman, my name is Wendell Griffin. I am Sheriff Higgins, Lee County.
Well, Mr. Griffin, we're not. This is not a criminal proceedings, and typically I do not allow anybody to come to the table other than the witnesses. So if you'll return to the long as behind that little wall right there is fine. And Mr. Griffin, I never have anybody come to the table with our witnesses because we want the answers to be theirs. And if the sheriff chooses not to answer the question, then that's his choice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're ready to start taking testimony. And Sheriff Higgins, if you would please turn your microphone on there. There you go. I guess first off, so we have a better foundation of what the docuseries is about, can you give us the Reader's Digest version of what your intent and what the docuseries was meant to be for?
Yeah. Well, first of all, my name is Eric Higgins, Pulaski County Sheriff. I want to give you the background of this. I was elected sheriff in 2019. When I ran for sheriff, I ran on putting a reentry program into our detention facility to address recidivism in our state in Pulaski County. In May of 2019, I started a reentry program. It's been continually going on since then. And part of that program is putting people who volunteer to be in the reentry program, we put them into one unit to create a community, to create a culture of peer support. And we have been doing that since 2019. And that program is successful. We have a recidivism rate of around 5%. We've had several hundred go through our program, and we have a community there. Now, if I'm going to address the entire facility to make the facility safer, because I want to point out our reentry unit is the safest unit in the facility. When you look at a detention facility of 1,210 with a population ranging around 1,300 or better, we have things that go on in the jail that some people may not realize. We have fights that go on. We have people try to bring contraband into any of our facilities. And the point I want to make about this facility, the Pulaski County Detention Facility was built in 1994. It is a direct supervision facility, and we're one of approximately a total of 3 facilities in the state of Arkansas. That's direct supervision, where the deputy is in the unit with the detainees. The rest of the county facilities, the rest of state prisons are indirect supervision, where the deputy or the jailer is outside the unit, monitoring by cameras, monitoring through windows, but not directly in there. They will periodically go in, do head counts and those kind of things. So there's a difference between our facility and other facilities. We do have 2 units in our in the county jail from the old jail that we still use. Those 2 units are indirect supervision. It's our A and B unit. Each one has 2 sides with 40 beds on each side. The deputy is in the middle in a separate room, but is able to monitor by cameras or through glass. I also want to point out those 2 units don't have doors on those units. They don't have doors, and they haven't had doors in however long, because of jail standards, there's no bathroom inside those units, in the individual units. So what we looked at when we were talking about the series of what we did in the facility, one, we have a facility where there aren't any doors. 2, our facility is direct supervision. We have 2 that are indirect supervision. Pulaski County Sheriff's Office, we struggle with filling positions. Right now I have 61 vacancies in the detention center, and we struggle to fill those positions. And as I look at other facilities that are indirect supervisions, one of the things I looked at was, can I transform this facility to an indirect supervision facility, moving the deputy out of the unit and having them monitor through cameras on what goes on in the facility. Now, I wish we had enough cameras to cover every aspect of the detention facility. During my tenure, we have installed over 250 cameras in the detention center. We have taken several steps into making the facility safer. When I took office, detainees could pop the locks and get out of their individual cells, and that's been going on for some time. Thanks to petitioning the quorum court and receiving the funding, we were able to replace all the locks in the facility and replace the control system. This is over a $3 million project to update the facility. So we've been moving forward with updating the facility. When I evaluate the detention center, I'm looking at threefold. One is the facility, how secure it is, what's the technology in the facility. 2, the staffing, what training do they receive? Our training staff, to meet jail standards, had to do 40 hours of training. We do 8 weeks of training to help our jailers, our deputies, to become better employees, to be able to perform the job that we call them to do. And the third area is looking at the detainees themselves. They are part of the facility. We are responsible for them. We're responsible for their care. We're responsible to be a rehabilitating facility. 80% of the people who are booked in the county jail are released to our community. And so we must take action. I took action to ensure that we have a reentry program to help those who are booked into our facility to come out and be better individuals. So those are the steps we were actually going through. State prisons provide some reentry programs, and they have some good programs out there. I just don't believe you got to wait till somebody spends 15 years in prison before you try to help them to become acclimated into our community. And so as we look at trying to make a safer facility, I have to look at the detainees themselves. And how can I help them to move forward? How can I help them to take on additional responsibility for their actions and understanding their community? The reentry program, it took time to be able to adjust and create that community where you have mentors in the facility who are detainees, and you have people coming in and teaching classes in there. We have a community, and it took a little bit for this to come into full effect. Well, not everyone booked into the county jail will volunteer to be a part of our reentry program, nor will they qualify to be a part of the reentry program. So how do I transform the entire facility to make it safer? You take a unit that represents the Pulaski County Detention Facility. At any given time, we will have over 50 individuals who are charged with murder. We'll have 160 or so individuals charged with aggravated assault. We'll have drug charges and others. So if I'm going to make a transformation, then I have to take a typical unit. I did not seek Netflix or Lucky 8. I didn't reach out to any production company or anyone else for this. A Lucky 8 production company reached out to me. They were aware of our reentry program. They were aware that we were doing something different, that we were having a positive impact on our facility and on the community. And so we discussed what my next steps were and what I was going to do. And we discussed having them to come in and bring additional cameras and to record some of the things that we were not, with our cameras, we were probably not going to be aware of. It was a learning experience. What we learned is that people will step up and will become a community, regardless of their charges, that you can create a safer facility. We did learn that because of their cameras, that there were certain ways that they were making tattoo ink that we were not aware of. We also learned that we need to do a better job of checking the action packer lid to ensure we find contraband. But we've done a lot to try to address that. We have used Recovery Act money, thanks to the Quorum Court. We have body scanners in our facility. We have mattress scanners. We try to eliminate as much contraband as possible in the facility. But we have to address the behavior in the facility. We have to address the individuals in the facility and help them to take ownership. Because the reality of it is we can't just use a heavy stick. You can't do it in the policing on the street, and you can't do it in a facility. You have to motivate people. You have to provide something positive for them. The unit is H unit where this documentary took place. The doors are still unlocked. The unit is the second safest unit in the facility. It was the second safest unit during the filming, and it still is next to our reentry unit. The only difference I've done, I've put the deputy back into the unit. The reason I put the deputy back into the unit instead of moving forward with indirect supervision is because the detainees wanted the deputy in the unit, not for safety purposes, but to answer questions. Why the kiosk doesn't work, why I can't make these phone calls, what's going on with my case. They wanted the deputy in the unit as a resource to them.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff. That pretty much gives us a decent foundation of the purpose behind the docu-series. But you spoke about recidivism back in episode 2 and your research and other models. What research did you look at, and what models did you use in your decision making?
So when I look at when I'm looking at the recidivism of the state of Arkansas and looking at over the years what the recidivism rate is here, and it's around 48%. It has gone down in the last couple of years. Of course, we had a pandemic that occurred that may have had some impact, but I think the Department of Corrections is trying to do the best they can to address the recidivism with the programs that they have. Prior to becoming sheriff, I worked with a reentry program, the Exodus Project. I worked with the Department of Community Corrections to address the individuals who are coming to the streets, coming back from incarceration. You know, I think one of the important things to do when you're looking at research is actually talk to individuals who are impacted by the incarceration, the system, the criminal justice system, and talking to those individuals and the things that they needed.
So that was the research. And so what about models? What models did you look at?
So when you're talking about other programs that occur in other states, there's other, when you look outside the country, there's other programs that try to help individuals. When you look at people complain about, sometimes people complain about the federal system, prison systems, where there's more humane treatment or perceived to be more humane treatment of individuals in the facility. So I would say I looked at personal experience, contacts I've had with the criminal justice system, my 30 years in law enforcement experience, my experience working with individuals, whether on the street or in a detention setting.
So, and when you said models outside of the country, did that include places like El Salvador, Nicaragua, Venezuela?
Sir, I want to say this. You know, when I was invited here, I reached out and asked whether specific questions would be asked of me. And I was told there were no specific questions, but there appears to be specific questions. And I would
The question, Sheriff, I've watched the series 3 times, and that's where my questions are coming from.
So again, if you wanted us to provide some documentation, we could have tried to provide additional documentation.
I just thought maybe that you could provide that while you were sitting there. So I'll go ahead and go to my co-chair, Senator Bryant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sheriff, for being here. I know we don't necessarily always like to have meetings just to have meetings. And so I kind of wrote down some outcomes that I would like to see from this meeting. Lessons learned. Just you briefly touched on a few of those. Appreciate that. Any rules, standards, laws that were maybe bent or broken to try to accomplish your objectives that maybe we need to look at as a body. And then what steps forward to ensure the protection and the safety and integrity of our system, of our prison system. And so I've got a list of questions. I'll try to, I'm really just more trying to understand the premise of like the 23-and-1 rule. I know it was a premise that the series used to make sure that maybe the audience understood that these are not just your low-level criminals. These are potentially violent, potentially gang-related. That was the impression maybe I got. What other reason to ensure somebody's locked up for 23 hours and allowed 1 hour of free time? And so I guess my question is, can you elaborate on why the 23-hour one, and does HPOD still follow the 23-1 even though the doors are open? Do other pods require a 23-and-1 rule? And then what process does your office use to classify the inmates to ensure that there's no outbreak or riot inside the HPOD?
So thank you. First of all, the 23-and-1 comes from some disciplinaries we do in the facility. But during the pandemic, operating with separating people, the 6 feet separation, the number of people we have in their facility, only being able to allow a certain number of detainees out at a time. That was going on during the pandemic. But even after that, when you have a staffing level with 60-something vacancies, there's times when we have to have linked doors open, when we have 2 units that are connected and 1 deputy working 2 units. And to operate in there, we have to limit the number of people we pull out of a unit. And when you have 40 to 80 individuals in a unit, by the time you go through everyone trying to get them out and having a reasonable number of people out, it ends up being about 23-and-1. There are disciplinaries that take place in the detention facility where we may put a unit on lockdown because of behavior. We are a young agency, meaning that even though the sheriff's office has been in existence for 200 years, our average employees maybe have 2 to 3 years of experience. Most people who get in law enforcement do not want to work in a jail setting. And we find that with our contract medical team. Even the medical profession didn't want to be in the jail. When you look at your commissary team, they don't want to be. Most people don't want to be in a jail setting. So it's a struggle to try to fill these vacancies, and so that is a factor. The number of detainees, or excuse me, the number of deputies that we have, as well. As far as classifying, we have a classifying unit. And everyone who's booked in, they look at their sheet, look at their history, and determine where they can be in the facility. Some people have mental health issues, and we've tried to address those issues. We've tried to increase I have 4 mental health professionals in the facility. That's 1,210 bed facility, averaging 1,300. It's a transient population. We booked in 14,000 people last year into our facility. So we've tried to petition the Quorum Court for Recovery Act funds and for general funds to increase our mental health services to try to address the population. Unfortunately, we were not able to get those funds for that. So we try to do the best we can to isolate or to separate. If people are having fights with each other, we'll separate them if they have a history, unless they agree that they can be in a unit together. When we look at separation because of charges, if the prosecutor's office or the arresting agency will notify us that they have people on the same case and they want them separated, we will separate them at that point. If they don't notify us, then we won't do that, because just the reality of investigation and law enforcement, it may be a case where they're working the two individuals against each other, and they want someone to testify against the other. So they may want them in the same unit. So we don't make that decision on our own to separate people who are on the same charges unless we're notified by the arresting agency or the prosecutor's office.
Okay, so just to wrap up the classification. So if you have somebody awaiting trial or pre-sentencing, post-sentencing, that piece doesn't matter as much as maybe the level of violence that person may or may not be accused of or adjudicated of?
It's the behavior in the facility. I mean, we don't just base some of the most compliant detainees will be the ones charged with murder. And so it's not necessarily the charge that brings them into the facility, it's their behavior in the facility.
Okay.
We don't
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr.
yes,
Chair.
sir.
Mr. Wooten, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff, let me qualify my questions before I ask them, but I'm a former trooper, former with state police, sergeant, and I've been involved in Cummins and Tucker under different situations, so I understand what you're facing. My question goes back to the one that the chairman asked concerning who contacted who. You say you didn't, but did anyone in your organization have any contact with Lucky 8 or Netflix prior to their contacting your agency?
No, sir.
They had none.
No, sir.
Do you know how that evolved from you being contacted?
My understanding, they did their own research. I've been contacted by other production companies, the Cop Show. There's companies that do a show of recording people coming into intake in a jail setting. So that's not uncommon for production companies to reach out. They're doing cop shows or law enforcement shows to reach out to police agencies. Like I said, I've been contacted by some before, and I've said no.
So you said that you had been contacted by other production companies.
Yes, the office has, yes.
Okay. What made this different?
What made this different was I told them I'm not interested in doing a show, so to speak. I'm interested in what I'm doing to transform the facility, something I can continue, something that goes beyond a moment in time, 6 weeks in time. And H unit is still operating. The doors are still unlocked. We're still moving forward. So this was something that was recording what we were planning on doing. How do we transform the entire facility to make it safer for the detainees, make it safer for the deputies that work there? And so that was my interest is moving forward. I wanted, if we're going to record something, if we're going to show something, my interest was two-part: humanizing people who are in jail, and two, to show that people will rise up to our expectations. And these individuals, they stepped up, and there was conflict. And please understand also that what you see in an 8-week or 8 episodes, approximately 43 minutes apiece, represents 8 weeks. And so there's a lot of things that you don't see. You don't see the shakedowns. You don't see the team going in and searching the facility. You don't see the number of people that we remove like we would any other unit for behavior. There's a lot of other things going on in there. So the purpose, and I think we accomplished that. You know, I had a TV crew ask me, was this a risk having them in here? And I told them, yes, it was. But it's also a risk when I have the news media come into my facility or to the county's facility. And whether it's looking at the locks in the facility, whether it's talking to them about our reentry program or anything else that we're doing, I don't control what they produce. And a lot of times it's 3 minutes of me talking and something else. You know, I do recall one channel coming in talking about talking about mental health, and my whole point was that we don't have the mental health services that we need in the facility. But the story was that we got the additional mental health funding, and we did not. So I don't control what the media does, and I wanted to accomplish the two things I mentioned to you: humanizing the people in our facility and showing that people will rise up. And it takes about 6 weeks for that transformation to happen in the facility. That's been our experience in our reentry program that we've been doing in the facility since 2019, that I've been involved in through volunteer services since 2015.
See, I think that's the reason that I'm asking the questions relative to the media being involved, because we came, and I say we're involved in this with you.
Yeah.
We have so many, 6,000 or so prisoners, maybe more. I don't know about that in our penitentiary, in our prison system, and we do not control. And to me, that's all the reason more not to let them in. And certainly, well, you can laugh about it, but to me, it creates a situation where it's glorifying criminals. And I feel like that. Will you agree with this? That you have two protective areas. One is to protect the general public from the criminal element. And two, once they're incarcerated in your facility, you have the responsibility to protect them. So it's a dual role, is it not?
I agree with that. And also want to point out that the majority of people in my facility are not convicted. I do have a responsibility for them. I also have a responsibility to prevent crime and preventing crime in our community. And so part of preventing crime in our community, yes, is patrolling, it's making arrests, it's working with our youth so they don't get involved in the criminal justice system. And it's also working with the individuals in the system already and trying to give them the tools and resources they need so when they come out, they will not reoffend and create other victims in our community. So part of what I do includes that. And the reason I was laughing is that sometimes you're right. When the media is coming in, it's a question. It's a question whether you want to do an interview with them or not. So it's a risk we all take, and I agree with you on that.
Okay. Next question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. State prisoners who had been convicted used in this program?
I would have to go back and look at the notes. I think some of them were convicted, or they may have a conviction and additional charge on them while they were in there.
So
but I'd have to go back and check to see if any of them were convicted during. But I don't think we had anyone in the facility, so I can't answer that question without the information. But I'm willing to go back and look at it and give you specifics on that.
I would appreciate that, and I think the committee would be interested in knowing the number of state prisoners that were involved, and were they involved within the standard agreement that we have with the county jails to hold prisoners for the state. Mm-hmm. But once they're convicted, if they're a state prisoner, they are a ward to the state. And so do you agree that they should be used or should not be used?
I understand the direction you're going. I would say that while they're here, I am responsible for them, yes. I don't, and again, I I have to check my numbers, but I don't think we had any that were convicted during this period of time were just on state prisoners. They may have been on parole and in the facility on additional charges, but again, I do not know. I will have to go back and look at those numbers.
Okay, did you use any murderers or rapists in the program, in
There
the
were-
documentary?
The answer is 2 people signed release to be in there that were charged with murder. There's one individual who had, according to our records, prior to this, in December, I believe it was, the person came into our facility on one set of charges, and then another agency put additional charges on them. One of the charges listed was rape. The speed letter that we got from the court listed that charge with a bond, I believe, of $250,000. And then the next day we received a second speed letter from that same court that did not include the rape charge, and the bond was dropped to $100,000. So according to our records, what we perceived is that the rape charge was dropped. And so that was a few months prior to the person being placed in this unit.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Sheriff.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Wooten. And so, Sheriff, you would agree that Pulaski County receives a substantial amount of money from the state for detention of prisoners. Is that correct?
I'm aware that the state pays X amount per detainee per day. Yes.
Yes, and to withhold any of those funds would have a detrimental effect on your operation, correct?
You know, it costs to run the detention facility. So
Well, I'm just saying, that's just a yes or no answer.
it would definitely impact our facility.
Okay, thank you. Representative Ray, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Right here in front of you, Sheriff.
Sorry, Ray.
Hey, that's okay. I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate all of the interactions that we've had. As you know, I represent a good portion of northern Pulaski County, and as when this news came out about this Netflix series, I started getting a lot of questions from constituents, questions that I wasn't able to answer. And so some of these questions that I have some of them are mine, and some of them I'm relaying on behalf of constituents that I've also encouraged to contact your office. Part of what I want to understand is how we got to the point where the decision was made to televise these efforts that you've made in the jail. So I know you mentioned that you were approached by Lucky 8 or Netflix or whoever. You did not approach them. But, and I read in the paper you said you didn't have a legal obligation to contact the judge or anybody else. But did you contact the county judge about this, about the televising of this series before it happened?
No, I contacted the county attorney, and I asked the county attorney, do I have the authority to allow this crew to come in and film within the facility? And he said, yes, you do have the authority. You control the jail. You can let people in. You can let them out. You can shut the jail down if you see fit. Yes, you have the authority to do that.
Okay. I'm just a little bit confused on your answer, because the Demgas story from March 16th said, oh, sorry, not March 16th. The one from March 19th said, County Judge Barry Hyde, the county's top administrative official, said in a statement that Sheriff Eric Higgins in 2021 presented the idea of having a crew from Lucky 8 film inside the Pulaski County Jail, but the deal was never finalized after Hyde and a county attorney raised concerns. So the paper reported that that meeting with the attorney raised concerns. You said that the attorney basically told you you had a green light.
The attorney told me I had the authority to do that. Now, the attorney reached out, I'm sure, to Barry Hyde and talked to him about that. They drafted up possible contracts if we wanted to do that. And we decided to move forward after a couple of years we move forward with, or maybe a year to move forward with the videotaping of the unit.
Okay, so you were relying on the legal advice of the county attorney, it sounds like, or someone
Correct.
else?
The county attorney.
Okay. Did you communicate your intention to do this with any of the members of the quorum court, either individually or collectively?
No, I did not.
Okay.
But I had been in contact with the quorum court of other things that we do in the facility, and of course, I always provide them opportunity to come to the county jail, see what we do, tour the facility. So that invitation has always been open to them to see what we are doing in our facility.
Given that the quorum court funds your budget and has allocated significant resources to help you do many of the things that you want to accomplish in the jail, I mean, do you feel like it would have been prudent to give them some sort of heads up or visit with them about your decision to do this?
I feel that I have reached out to the quorum court on a number of occasions about what we do in our facility. The quorum court has, I do not have support of full quorum court for a reentry program. I do not have support of the quorum court to increase mental health services in the facility. So I do try to reach out to them and let them know what we're doing, but
not about the filming specifically.
not particularly about that, but about that we're trying to transform the facility, change what we're doing in the county jail.
One thing that I was a little bit curious about and most of what I know about this is either what I watched in the docuseries or what I read in the paper. So I do have a lot of questions about it. In the March 16th story, it says that your office agreed not to disclose participation in the production prior to the airing.
But
Can you explain why, as an elected official, as somebody whose responsibility it is to lead and communicate on the operations of your office, why would you voluntarily give up your ability to communicate about what you're doing?
What I communicated to them also was that if anyone asked if it's FOI, anything like that, I would release the information, so that would not be protected. And prior to even filming being done, we were getting FOI requests about the production. So the information was out because we were receiving FOI requests prior to even doing any filming, and that was communicated to them that if asked, the information would be given. Okay.
All right. So they gave you the ability to talk about it. You just chose not to. Okay. I want to ask you a few questions about the jail experiment itself. You mentioned some of the influences that helped you arrive at this idea. Were there any specific criminologists or sociologists that advised you on this particular jail experiment?
You know, I would tell you that dealing with the criminal justice system for over 30 years, having implemented a reentry program in the facility, and I want to point out, I didn't ask the quorum court to implement my reentry program. I did what I knew was the right thing to do from working with others who worked with people coming out of jail and also listening to people who were incarcerated. When I started the reentry program, I started with the ladies in our facility. Why? Because the ladies I had come in contact with through the other reentry program, the Exodus Project, we knew that there weren't enough facilities, enough programs for women coming out of jail. And so we started with the ladies in our program. And then we expanded. And so it is real life experience in what we're doing, what we have done in this jail setting, and the success of what we've done. And that was used, real life experience is what I used to take the next step to try to create a safer facility.
Okay. So you relied on your own experiences to come
My
up with
experience and those who were in the criminal justice system who worked in reentry understanding their behavior, understanding how to interact with individuals. My experience as a police officer, my experience as an executive leader of a law enforcement agency, and my education in dealing with human services, leadership, and counseling. So I use those experiences to try to implement a program. Just like when I started with the reentry program, we started a pilot program to gradually move forward. And I look at this as the same way. And the intent is we have success in what we're doing, and we're planning on expanding into other parts of the jail. You know, we before the pandemic started, we were doing a tier system. Based on behavior, detainees can move to a certain unit that had a larger TV in it. They could purchase certain things on commissary. And what we found out was we didn't have enough upper tier units because the detainees would respond to positive things. They would keep their unit clean. They wouldn't fight. They wouldn't bring in contraband. Their behavior changed based on the carrot, so to speak. And so we use those experiences, actual live experiences, working with people in this facility to take the next step and to move forward in making positive changes in our facility.
So as you're conducting the jail experiment, how do you track the outcomes to determine whether it's a success or not? Like, what rubrics do you use?
So we track the number of incidents in each of our units, whether it's fights with other detainees, whether it's not following the directions of the deputies, conflicts with the deputies, contraband in the unit. And so we're tracking that, tracking the safety of the unit itself. And we have data on all our units.
What about, I mean, I presume the goal is, the long-term goal is to reduce recidivism, to keep people from reoffending once they've been released. And that's mainly, I mean, I know it's easy to keep track of what happens in the jail in terms of number of incidents and that sort of thing, but I'm thinking long range, if this is truly an experiment in recidivism reduction, how are you tracking these folks once they leave your custody?
So we track the individuals who are leaving our facility, our reentry unit. We track whether they've been arrested again across the nation. We track rearrests, whether it's you didn't go to your parole officer and the warrant was issued for your arrest, you forgot to go to court. If you were arrested for that, we also track whether or not they're going back to prison. So the same system that we use to find people, we use that to Justice Exchange. We use those systems to track individuals who leave our facility. We know where they're going. Did they go? Because some people leaving our reentry program, the goal is that they're a better person wherever they go. If they go to state prison, they go to federal prison, I want them to be compliant and follow the rules of that facility. So we track whether someone goes to a federal prison or whether they go to a state prison or a transitional house. Wherever they go, we are in communication. We are also periodically checking the system to see if there's been a rearrest.
And have any of the participants in the Netflix series, have they reoffended have any of them reoffended since they've been released?
So we may have had one of those, but let me explain something to you. I think there's a disconnect here. I'm trying to make a safer facility today, regardless of where they go. I may have some individuals coming out of H unit or coming out. As I track the people in our reentry program, their recidivism rate. We track the entire facility's recidivism rate, which is about 34% for the entire facility. But for our reentry program, it's about 5%. But I'm also trying to make a safer facility.
Sure.
Every day. So
I understand that.
So I just want to point. I'm not tracking those individuals' recidivism rate. What I'm tracking is this facility, is this unit safe or safer for the deputy? Is it safer for the detainee in that unit? And so if I can create that community in that unit. Now, over time, when we expand, we may look at that, but we track recidivism for the facility overall, and also understanding that these individuals, when people are in our jail, they may start out in one unit and be moved to another. The individuals we moved out of H unit went into other units. So I can only, the practical is what's going on in that unit. If I want to go the direction you're going, then I have to track just those individuals that actually left our facility and were released.
Well, I think if you're conducting an actual experiment and not just a reality TV show, I think it's important to document all of where these folks go afterwards and what happens. And we sort of glossed over the when I asked the question about whether someone had reoffended. There's at least one that was covered by a local news station for that was almost as soon as he was released, was reoffended for, I believe it was selling meth that he was obtaining from Mexico.
So if I can comment on that individual was released to a transitional house in Florida. And so that person went to Florida and I think spent several months in a transitional house and then was released, and that arrest occurred after that. And it's also my understanding that the connection with, and I don't have the details of that, but what I understand from reading or watching the news is that the family also, they don't think it was he was rearrested, but it didn't have anything to do with the cartel or Mexico, drugs from Mexico. I don't know the truth in that, but I just want to point out that person did go to another state and go through a transitional facility. And this is going to happen. Not everybody coming out of prison with programming is going to be successful.
Sure,
the first
that's
time
fair.
out.
That's totally fair. If one of the long-term goals is reducing recidivism, one thing that I was struck by as I watched the series was the inclusion of one individual that's in jail for a life sentence. Why? Maybe you explained this earlier when you talked about you want them to behave well while in jail, but if the goal is to keep someone from reoffending once they're released, why not include someone who we know is going to be released as opposed to someone who has a life sentence?
Again, moving forward, we have a reentry program. Not everybody's going to want to be in the reentry program. This phase is about a safer facility. And because we have so many people charged with murder and aggravated assault and battery in this facility, they're spread out throughout all our units. And so the purpose that we engaged in is, can I create a safer facility? Can I create a safer unit with a typical population, not a sterilized population, but a typical population, which would include somebody charged with murder, somebody charged with aggravated assault, a gang member. It would include somebody who's a little bit older. It would include a younger person. It would include people who are involved in different gangs, but being in the same unit. That's the population of the Pulaski County Regional Detention Facility. And if I'm going to address the safety in the entire facility, I can't take a sterile unit and see if it's effective. I know I can take a sterile unit and make it effective. But can I take a typical unit? Because I don't have the bed space for the number of people that I need to hold in this facility. It's a 1,210 bed facility. The reality of it, I need about 700 more beds. I mean, you can talk to any law enforcement agencies that makes arrests in Pulaski County, and we're having to turn people away at the door because we don't have enough bed space.
And you and I have talked about the overcrowding issue before.
So the purpose of this part of what we do, because there's several pieces into what we're doing at the sheriff's office. We're addressing recidivism. We're working with youth in our community. We're making sure we're policing our community well. We're trying to bring resources to people in the community, but also that community called the detention center. How do I create, and what steps have I been taking to change the DNA of our facility, change the expectation in this facility, change it one unit at a time, a typical unit? Because yes, I have somebody in there that's most of them there are probably going to go to prison. But while they're there, in this jail, I need to make it as safe as possible. And the only way you're going to make it safe as possible, you can't use brute force to make people to be compliant in a jail setting. Jailers require cooperation from the detainees. It is the same way you police the streets. You require cooperation from your community. And in a jail, the community are these detainees. And so it's convincing them that they can have a positive impact on their community. Listen, when you come into a jail setting, when you have a detainee coming in here, there's the issue of safety. Do I trust the people around me? Does anybody care about my well-being? And you have to create a culture, an environment where, yes, we do care, because I do care, because I am responsible for them. As Pulaski County Sheriff, yes, I am responsible for them in that facility and trying to make it as safe as possible.
Sure.
Okay.
I can appreciate your responsibility there. The individual that I was referencing that was in for life is the individual that went and murdered another person at CHI St. Vincent in Sherwood a couple of years ago.
Yes.
And it makes me wonder if you gave any consideration to how that would impact the families of the victims of these inmates when they're seen on TV in this particular individual smiling and shooting a basketball. Did you give any consideration to how the victims, the families of the victims would feel seeing this on television?
I did take that into consideration. It's unfortunate. It is a terrible thing for someone to lose a loved one through violence. That's terrible. But the suspect or the person convicted also has family too, and they're concerned about how they're being treated in the facility. And there's always going to be a rub. In law enforcement, there's always going to be this rub between the family of a victim and the family or the suspect in how they're being treated.
I guess I'm just more sympathetic to the family.
Can I say something? Just on the video,
Sheriff.
I just wanted to make a comment about the video. I mean,
Hurry up.
Then when the TV stations show people being arrested and walking to and fro, they're also seeing them in that manner as well. And I know that is traumatic as well.
I'll hop out of the queue. I'm sorry.
We're going to have to move on, and Representative Ray will put you back in the queue, or we're going to have to turn this into a docuseries itself. So, Sheriff, were there any inmates charged with crimes in this docuseries?
No, we had in our jail setting, just like in state prisons, there are things that happen. There are fights that occur. There's violation of policies. There's things that happen, and there's internal disciplines that take place. And so we did in this unit, and it was important that I emphasized to our staff that we will conduct the same disciplinaries that we would in any other unit, which may include removing that person from the unit. It may include losing commissary or other things. So we did those. We had one individual that we filed charges on a drug that was what we thought, I think it tested positive for cocaine. But further tests revealed that it was actually their prescription medication that they had crushed. And so we had those charges dropped on that individual. So there were no criminal charges filed against anyone in that unit. But we did the same disciplinary that we would do for the same violations in any other unit.
No charges for the two beatings that took place in the series, or the alcohol?
Disciplinary actions were taken on those internal disciplinaries were taken on those individuals, and I'd have to go back and look at the specific discipline. Generally, we have a fight or something, we may remove the person from the unit, and some of I'll just leave it at that. That we provide disciplinary according to our policies. What the normal discipline actions will be taken based on the level of action. Okay. If it's a serious assault, we may do a criminal charge.
Senator Chesterfield.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for allowing me to ask a question as a non-member of this committee. Sheriff Higgins, welcome.
Thank you.
As always, good to see you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
one of the things that is troubling to me is the differences in how we view things. And I want the members of the clergy who are here today to please stand. Because I think it's important for folks to understand that various members of the community view this in very different ways. They are here because they support what Sheriff Higgins has done. I thank you all so very, very much for being here. And the vast majority of these individuals I represent. And they're looking for someone to provide humane treatment for people who have been treated inhumanely. And that's at the root of so much of what we're dealing with today. When I think of the 34% recidivism rate as compared to what at the state level, Sheriff Higgins, about 46%?
Yes, 46, 48.
46 to 48. So the recidivism rate at the Pulaski County jail is substantially lower.
Yes.
Anytime we can reduce that recidivism rate, we have done something right. And at the end of the day, we've got to remember that this is what? Still jail.
Yes. Yes.
Perfect people don't go to jail. Perfect people don't murder or commit assault. That's why they're in what? Jail. Now, I am probably the only person in America that has not seen the show and don't want to, because it's not something I look at. But I do want to say that as the representative or as the senator for a lot of these folks in this room, if it matters to them, it has to matter to me. And I think it ought to matter to everybody in this room that we are viewing this through different lenses. We're viewing this through different lenses. And it's important that we respect the lenses through which we view this. Now, how much of the cost of keeping a prisoner, a state prisoner in jail, does the state reimburse?
I think it's $42, $44 a day.
And the total cost per day for keeping most prisoners is what?
Around $67 to $72 a day.
So we're not really fully funding the individuals to whom we send to the jail. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
Okay, and as we go forward in this relationship between the state and the county is already dealing with this issue, is it not?
Yes.
And I'm not sure what our outcome here is supposed to be, but I would have been remiss had I not said what I said. I thank you for what you're trying to do, because as we make people more humane, then perhaps, just perhaps, they may act that way. Would you agree?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, my friend, Senator Dismay. All right, it's the last time I'm going to say it. I'm going to start having people removed. If I have to clear the entire audience, I'll do that. And it's not very funny either. All right, why don't you just go ahead and leave right here? You. Yes, with the beard, the gentleman with the glasses and the beard. Yes. Thank you. Okay, Senator Dismay, you're recognized.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, let me say that I don't have an issue with programming, and I don't have an issue with you trying to create a safer environment in your jail. What I don't really understand is the fact that we needed to publicize it, that you felt like we needed to have a TV show about it, and then to call something an experiment that is not a controlled environment, that could never be an experiment, because you would want to lean to a better outcome. And I think in your answering, I can pick up on some of that. We don't want to answer questions about what happened with particular inmates because it doesn't reflect as maybe well as we would like. But some of my questions go back to, I don't want this to happen again. I think it's an exploitation of your prisoners that you allowed a film crew to come in. I mean, I assume that they all signed waivers. So that's my question. Did they all sign waivers and all of your staff sign waivers?
Yes.
Would you not think that would be under duress if you're a prisoner? Did they have a choice to sign a waiver?
They did have a choice.
Okay, then did that not taint your experiment pool from those that wanted to sign a waiver and those that didn't? Did everyone agree to sign a waiver, or were there some people in H Block that didn't want to participate that didn't sign a waiver and moved to another? And again, I haven't watched the show, so I don't know enough about it. I'm like Senator Chesterfield. I don't think that I'm interested in it. But how did that go about? How did that process exist?
So those who were interested had to sign a waiver that wanted to be, and they knew they were going to be recorded.
So it's not an experiment. Because it's not, it is, you made a big deal about how this couldn't be a tainted population, that you went and picked and chose who was going to be in it. Well, it already is, because it was only those that were willing to be filmed. Is that correct?
Yes, it was only those
Okay.
who were willing to
So
be
it's not an
filmed.
experiment. We could never get into a real outcome, and nothing was ever going to be measurable. As far as your deputies and everyone else that was involved, they all signed waivers. Did any of them not want to sign waivers?
They signed waivers who wanted to be in the unit.
Did you have anyone that
Yes,
was over that unit that said, you know what, I don't want to be a part of this, I'm not going to sign a waiver?
So the way that our detention facility works, our deputies they work in certain units and then they move around. And so you don't work in the same unit.
Answer
for
my
12 months. So
question
the
was,
answer
I get
is that we
that.
had people who did not want to be assigned to the unit during the filming. And so we did not assign them to the unit during the filming.
Okay. I mean, and I think that should tell you something. You had prisoners, you had deputies, you had others that did not want to be a part of your experiment, your publicized experiment. And yet you had others that wanted to. And what compensation were the prisoners compensated for their face time, and were your deputies compensated any additional dollars for their work or utilizing their image?
No.
So the only people out there that are benefiting from the use of these people's faces, from your deputies' work, is Lucky 8.
If you're talking about financially.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. But we are benefiting, the sheriff's office is benefiting from, you can say it's not an experiment, that we didn't learn anything.
No, sir, I just want to know, who is benefiting financially from this whole thing with the exception of Lucky 8 Productions or whatever it is? Is anyone else benefiting financially? That's the question. I don't want to go down another road.
Okay,
I want the answer to that question.
To honestly answer the question, as far as, I know it's a broad question, what Lucky 8 did, what Netflix did,
No.
I don't know about it, but internally, then the answer is no.
So you allowed all these people to be exploited, including your deputies and these prisoners, receiving no compensation, so a private company could go contract with Netflix and have publicity. I mean, people don't create docuseries to make no money. They create these docuseries and then promote it to Netflix because Netflix is paying them, most of the time, it's a substantial amount of money to run the series. And so they're going to benefit greatly from your experiment, because the reality is, and I think you were doing it anyways in some way, you didn't need the publicity to do what you're doing. You said you already had the authority to do everything that you were doing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So you already had the authority. You'd already talked to legal counsel about all that. Some of these policies you have in place, which again, I applaud the fact that you want to do some programming inside the jail system. I think that's a worthy thing to do. I think we should be looking at every way we can, and we should be doing a lot more at the county jail level. I agree with that. I just don't understand why in 2021, your peers, and I think the sheriff is probably your peer, and I think these quorum court members are your peers, said, hey, you know what, we don't want to do this. And you said, you know what, I'm going to do it anyway, because you found out you had the authority. But then, I guess this is what I don't understand. And so no one finds out about this, or that it's happened. So there's a conversation in 2021, everything rolls along, and if I'm reading the press right and everything else, everybody's eyes were open that it existed whenever the promo started happening. What I don't get, so did you force the employees and the inmates and all these other people to sign non-disclosures?
No.
Then how in the world is there such a secret? So no one else signed a non-disclosure.
No. I mean, the employees who wanted to be a part of it and be filmed, they signed that.
But the rest of everybody else in the whole building, so the only people that signed a non-disclosure were the people working in H Block.
People who were working with the production company.
Do you feel like they might have been coerced, or felt the fact that their employer, their boss, said, you know what, we have to have, would you not feel as though, I'd understand why he wouldn't want to answer the question too, sir.
Mr. Chairman, may I consult with my client without being interrupted?
Was anyone, who all signed non-disclosures to make this happen? Because again, it was tight-lipped until there was a promo that went out. Who signed non-disclosures?
Again, like I said in the beginning, I was not provided questions so that I could provide the answers. So if you want to provide me with additional questions and allow me the opportunity to answer those questions, I'd be more than willing to do that.
That's a pretty basic question. Did you
Well,
yourself
I don't have the
who
you asking for a
distributed
list
the
of people. I
non-disclosure
can't give you
agreements?
that.
All right, who distributed non-disclosure agreements for the employees and the inmates to sign?
I don't recall the process, but I can get you the information.
I have a feeling I know where this is going for the rest of the questioning. And so I'll just kind of say it like this. I think that's what's inappropriate. I think people were taken advantage of. I think that you were given warning to not do this by your peers in the quorum court and the county judge. No one was against your programming, I don't believe. No one was against what you were trying to do, at least in trying to better the jail. And I don't think it took a TV show to accomplish what you were trying to accomplish. And I think the exploitation is real. And I think you put people in a very bad situation. And what I want to do as a legislator is make sure it can't happen again. I don't want people that are in prison being exploited so that Lucky 8 Productions can make whatever amount of money they're going to make. Because, like I said, you could have done this with or without a television crew watching you. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And on the one question, so we're for things we want, you mentioned that there were FOIA requests prior to production even beginning. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like a copy of all of that to be submitted back to our legislative council for review. I'd like to see had that information because again, I am stunned that something this big went without any disclosure whatsoever. And I can think of no other venue that a film or anything shoots in the state of Arkansas of any notoriety that people don't know it's happening and aren't talking about it. And somehow, probably because there was exploited people, whether it be through the employees or the prisoners that you had there, that weren't allowed to communicate what was happening. And I think that was what's improper. But I think you've already said that you're not willing to answer any more questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Dismayne. Sheriff, did any member of your family or an employee of Pulaski County receive anything of value or any form of compensation from anyone associated with making of this docuseries or the promise of future compensation?
No.
Okay. So, and looking back at my notes from the 3 times that I watched the docuseries, I thought I made a comment in here. Probably the most intelligent comment was made by a seasoned criminal in there, Randy. Okay. And when he found out about the experiment, he said, "You gonna let a bunch of criminals run this place?" And then he laughed and he said, "It ain't gonna work." And that's coming from one of those inmates that was in the docuseries. So, Senator Bryant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So currently in HPOD, you said you've kind of left it the way the show let it run. Is that correct? I'm sorry, I'm right in the middle.
I'm sorry. Sorry, trying to know who's speaking. I'm sorry. Repeat the question. I apologize.
Currently in HPOD, you were letting it run as basically the doors are open.
The doors are open. The deputies inside the unit. Yes.
Is there any violation of jail standards with that approach?
No, I don't believe so.
So is it safe to say that the experiment was to remove the deputy from the room and let them handle their own affairs?
The experiment part of it was can I move to an indirect supervision unit like most jail settings where the deputy or the jailer is not in the room, continually with the other with the detainees.
Okay.
That was can we move them from the outside and still operate with cameras to monitor what goes on in the unit.
So does that process in any way violate jail standards?
This is the way most state prisons are run. They're indirect supervision. When this jail was built, it was built as a direct supervision. And the thought, from my understanding, the thought was most prisons would go to direct supervision, putting the jailer or the deputy in the unit with the inmates. But that's not how the rest of the jails are being built.
Okay. So is the experiment that it was a non-sterile environment and the classifications were to allow mixed mixed offenses in the room?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding your question.
I'm just wondering what the experiment is. If we can do what the show programming showed us, what was the experiment?
Empowering people to make decisions and understand that they can have a positive impact on their community by their actions, and recognizing going beyond just themselves, but being concerned about the entire community, and recognizing that their actions can positively or negatively impact their community.
Okay. So if we're doing everything that's within jail standards, was there any concern that a civil complaint would be filed against the jail due to lack of guards in the room or lack of oversight?
Jail standards doesn't require us to be indirect supervised unit or direct supervised units. We are following the jail standards in what we do. We're still following the jail standards, and no organization is perfect, but we try to comply with the jail standards every day.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sheriff, there were 3 checks that were written by Lucky 8 Productions, totaling $1,100 a piece. One of them was made out for cash, and the other 2 were made out to the detention centers. So when legislative audit shows up down at your place, are they going to be able to track or find where the funds from those checks went?
Yes.
Where did it go? Where did the cash go?
So and I'm not familiar with the cash of that. Well, you had money going on individuals' books in the unit to so we can do the phone calls and those things.
Wait a
so
minute,
that it
so-
wouldn't cost the county any loss of funds.
So the phone calls that you opened up to the inmates was paid for by Lucky 8?
Yes.
Okay, so why was one of the checks written for cash?
I'd have to go back and look at that because I'm not aware that one was written for cash.
So it wasn't used to buy another set of 21-inch chrome wheels for your county vehicle, was it? So you don't know where the cash went? Okay, well, and Senator Dees, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Mr. Sheriff. I'm over on this side. I had a question about the contracts. So I heard your testimony earlier about who approached who for the contract. Can you help me understand the length of time and what's involved with the negotiations of a contract with Netflix or productions companies with your team?
And with all due respect, I'm going to listen to my counsel, and I will ask you to submit any questions that you have for me. You asked me to be here. I volunteered to be here. Prior to coming, I asked were there any questions, specific questions this body had for me. You did not submit any questions. So I would ask this body, if you have the questions, please submit them, and I will respond to them. I'm not going to answer
Okay,
any
you're
more
excused,
questions.
Sheriff. Thanks for your attendance today. And our next witness. Our next witness will be the Honorable Judge Barry Hyde. He's not answering any more questions. We're not. Judge, if you would stand, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Thank you. And please, if you would, take your seat. turn your microphone on. State your name and position for the record.
I'm Barry Hyde. I'm the Pulaski County Judge.
Thanks, Judge, for being here. Senator Dees, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Judge. My last question was originally intended for Sheriff, but it was related to you as well. So I'd love your perspective. I was going to ask about the contract and how long those things take, but I wanted to get to your involvement with the contract. From the previous testimony, it sounded like there wasn't much of a collaboration with you, sir. Would you say that's accurate with the contract with Netflix?
There wasn't any collaboration or anything even spoken.
Okay. Is it typical for county contracts of this nature to not involve you or your team?
So I think the Constitution...
Judge, if you would, pull your microphone up a little closer to you, please. Thank you.
Is that better? Sorry. The Constitution and state law stipulates that no contract can be executed for any amount in county government except by the county judge.
And so I thought I heard that and this was my question for the sheriff, but maybe you can help me with your perspective. It sounds like 2 to 3 years of contract negotiations and communications for this program, for this idea, for this experiment we're going on, but your team wasn't involved to sign off or of any for 3 years. Is that right?
So as the county judge, I was never included, didn't know anything about it. So my team, I guess you're referring to the county attorney, isn't necessarily talking to me about every contract negotiation or legal matter that's going on with the county.
So is it possible that other negotiations or contracts could be going on without your knowledge today in other facilities?
I hope not.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
And Judge Hyde, did the discussion of this experiment, was there any discussion with you or members of your staff prior to entering into the agreement with the production company?
Not with my immediate staff. It's my understanding, as you've already been stated here today, that the county attorney, I think a couple of years ago, or maybe a year and a half ago at least, well, no, it'd be at least a couple of years ago, was given the contract to review.
Okay. Thank you, Judge. Representative Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge, thank you for being here and for answering questions related to this. Can you tell me when you first learned about the intent to put this jail experiment into a television docuseries or have it filmed?
I got a call from someone when apparently the first trailer was aired, about 2 months ago, I think.
Okay. I want to go back to, and I asked the sheriff this about the March 16th story. Hold on, I got 3 articles here. I think it was the March 19th story where they said in 2021, the sheriff presented to either you or the county attorney or a combination of the two of you this idea, and there were concerns raised. It was brought to you at that point? Is that right?
It was not. It was the county attorney. Contracts or contract negotiations don't normally come to me. They go to the purchasing department, which includes the county attorney.
Gotcha. And so the county attorney expressed concerns to you. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is the newspaper article said that the county attorney expressed concerns to the sheriff. The sheriff said that the county attorney basically gave him the green light to go ahead and that this was within his authority to do. Can you help clear up which of those accounts is accurate or more accurate?
So when this first trailer got aired and drew everybody's attention, the county attorney told me that that there had been a contract submitted and that it was and that he responded to the county sheriff.
Okay.
And so also I guess that draws the county sheriff, and I'm not a legal expert, I'm not an attorney, but as I understand it, after 11 years as county judge, county sheriff has the authority in the jail to run it as he chooses. That's his authority. He answers to people who elect him, just like the people, I answer to the people that elect me, as well as jail standards and DOJ. So that the problem for the county judge is not that the show was taped or kept secret or any of those things. The problem for the county judge is we have a contract.
Sure, the
that
contract
was signed illegally, and I'm assuming that's got to be resolved somehow.
Yeah, so you mentioned that, and that was mentioned in the March 19th story as well, that you characterized the agreement or contract as illegal. Can you outline your reasoning for calling it illegal?
It's an illegal document because it wasn't signed by the county judge. It is not a valid contract.
Okay. The other question that I had, I was going to pose to the sheriff, but I guess I'll pose it to you. One of the things that deeply concerns me about this production, and I agree with what Senator Dismang said, there's no reason that the sheriff could not conduct whatever recidivism program he has in place without it being the subject of a television series. There's a reason that Arkansas PBS didn't approach him and Lucky 8 Productions did. They, in my opinion, wanted to sensationalize and play up a lot of the negative aspects that we saw in the docuseries, the drugs, the violence, the weapons in the prison, the violence in the prison, the alcohol production in the prison, all of those things. I worry about, for most of the people that watched this docuseries, this is the first time they've ever been exposed to Pulaski County or perhaps even to the state of Arkansas. And I worry about the brand damage that our state sustains from this being the first perception of our state to other people. The things that we are doing, and the things that we are doing here in the legislature are, whether people agree with them or not, are aimed at making the state a better place to live, work, raise a family, start a business. And there's a reason that our state is now an inbound state for migration from other states. And there is brand damage, whether people want to admit it or not, when something like this happens. When HBO filmed Gang Wars in 1994, banging in Little Rock, that caused a perception of our state that I think still persists to this day. Have you seen the docuseries, and how do you feel about how it portrays our county and our state?
I have not seen it, sir.
Okay, well, that answers that. Thank you.
Judge, can you walk us through the funding? I think there was a sum of about $60,000 that was paid to the county, and the county sent the check back. Can you walk us through that scenario, please?
So it's a problem for government accounting to credit a check against a contract that's not an obligating contract. There's no debit to credit against, and specifically, the check was marked as a reimbursement, and there was nothing. The department said that they had no additional expense incurred, and so there was no charge to offset. So the choice for the county judge was to accept it as a gift or a donation or return it. And I felt to keep the lines cleaner, we should return it.
Okay. Thank you, Judge. Representative Springer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. And
Good afternoon.
Thank you for being here. I just want to get some clarification on what you've testified to. Did I hear you correctly to say that the sheriff has the authority to run the county jail as he sees fit? Did I understand that?
That is correct.
All right, thank you.
All the county elected officials are independent of one another. It's
Okay.
not like the city government where everybody's hired and works for the mayor.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to make sure I understand. And then you also said that the county sheriff has the authority to enter in contracts as well. Is that correct?
No,
You
ma'am.
don't. You didn't
No.
say that. So did you? Okay. So did you say? Well, let me just understand. Did you say that the county sheriff was working with the county attorney and working to enter into a contract? Did I hear you say that?
So a couple of years ago, the sheriff's department, and I'm not sure specifically the sheriff, but the sheriff's department submitted a contract, I'm sure to purchasing, and then as normal flow would be, it went to the county attorney. The county attorney marked it up and said, this is a bad agreement.
Okay, so what are we talking about? Are we talking about 2 years ago? Are we talking about the contract that involves the subject of why we're here today? Or are you talking about some other contract?
No,
Are you
that's-
talking about the contract, the reason why we're here today? Is that what you're speaking of? That's why I'm trying to get clarification.
So the
Because I'm
contract,
not
the
understanding.
contract we're here about today is, I guess, a version of the contract that was rejected by the county attorney's office something like 2 years ago.
Okay, so was this an issue then that has been brought before the quorum court? And I'm trying to understand why are we discussing a contract that was not proper in this particular setting? And let me just ask, was it discussed before the quorum court if it was not properly done?
No, quorum courts don't approve contracts.
Well, who approves the contract then?
The county judge.
So did you have a discussion then with anyone or even the sheriff about the contract?
No, because it didn't get past the county attorney's office.
It didn't get, so I guess I'm confused. So let me ask this question. Did you have a discussion with the county attorney about the contract that was trying to get past the county attorney?
Not until just a couple months ago when the first trailer advertisement was put on TV. And when it came up and everybody started asking questions, county attorney said, "Hey, we saw this proposal in a contract 2 years ago," or whatever the date was. They had an exact date, I assure you. And they said that the contract was intolerable. It held them completely harmless. It gave them complete creative control, and didn't do anything to protect the county in such a contract, and returned it to the sheriff's department with you would have to respond to all these red lines in this document for it to be considered.
So I'm still back to my same question about the county attorney. So how is it then that a contract that started almost 2 years ago, and it was before the county attorney to address, that you say that you never received, that a contract was entered into? So where is the county attorney here today to answer the question? Then, since it appears that you're not able to answer the question because you're saying that it was between the county attorney and the sheriff, right?
All contracts come into the county. They usually come through the procurement or purchasing department. They look for generally an appropriation if it involves purchasing something or buying some service, to make sure that there's an appropriation to pay for that agreement. Then it goes to the comptroller's office to verify that that it is appropriate to the department that is submitting it. In other words, that it's within their area of responsibility. Then it goes to the county attorney's office to be approved or recommended for change or denied, to make that legal evaluation of an agreement or a purchase order. And it's not until it goes through those three gates that it comes to my desk.
So I guess my question, did it go through that process then?
It did, and it stopped at the county attorney's office. And the county attorney would have engaged the sheriff's department with the questions or concerns they had. And it's my understanding that when they did that, it was the red lines were accepted, and there was no further discussion.
I don't understand. What do you mean by red lines were accepted? I guess I'm getting lost because you've told me about the process. It's in the county's attorney's office, and they're having a discussion. It's gone through the process, procurement, purchasing, all of that, and it's in the county attorney's office. So what happened once it got to the county's attorney's office? I guess it's not being made clear to me because you're saying that it never got to you, so you never approved the contract to have whatever took place that has taken place. So I'm trying to understand how did the county attorney allow it to be left in the office and it not get to you? That's what I'm not understanding. Please help me understand what role the county attorney had with respect to making sure that the contract got to you for approval or not approved, because I've heard earlier testimony to say that the county attorney approved what was taking place, and now you're saying that it was not approved. So I just would like to have clarification on that. That's why I asked the question as to whether or not the county attorney is here, because, to me, you're saying that the county attorney is the person that had the last say-so about the contract. Am I misunderstanding what you just testified to?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, please help me then.
The county attorney is a regular position of county government. In the case of Pulaski County, it is a position that's appointed or hired and then approved by the quorum court. And it is that person's responsibility to react or respond or advise in all matters of county operations to make sure that they are within the law. So they are part of that process that a contract goes through to gain recommendation that it move to the county judge's desk and for execution, to be signed. Are we together so far?
I'm with you.
Great.
With you.
So when it came to their office, they were not in agreement. They did not believe it was a good document. They felt like that document was detrimental to county business, and they redlined. Just like you would take a highlighter, and they redlined everything that they felt was inappropriate or shouldn't be agreed to, and they returned it to the sheriff's office. Are we together so far? So as I understand it, and the county attorney's not here, so I'm going to tell you.
Who is that person? Name that person. Who was
Adam
that county?
Fogelman.
I'm sorry?
Mr. Adam Fogelman.
Adam Fogelman, okay. So he returned it back to the sheriff's office.
Right.
And then what happened?
And as I understand it, the secondhand, that he had a conversation with the sheriff as to whether or not the sheriff could do this show. And the county attorney advised him, you have control over what you do in the jail. If you want to invite these people in and do this show, that's under your authority. I do not advise it because you will do it without a contract. We are not going to execute a contract, so you're going to have no protection under a contract.
So did Mr. Fogelman tell you this, or are you saying this is secondhand?
Well, he told me that. And
okay,
so
he did.
I'm telling you what he said, so that's secondhand information.
He said that he told that to the sheriff then, is what you, is your testament. Is that
is my understanding.
Okay, and so Mr. Fogelman is not here today then,
No,
right?
He's not.
Okay, is he still employed?
So we're going to have to move on.
Okay, one last question. Is he still employed by the Pulaski County?
Yes,
okay.
He is, but he's not on your agenda, ma'am.
I'm sorry.
You didn't invite him.
Oh, I didn't invite any of you all here. Thank you.
Representative Reeves.
Well, thank you for blessing
Representative East, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this question really was intended for the sheriff, but maybe if you can answer it, fine. I admire the fact that he's doing what he's doing to try to reduce recidivism and trying to teach these men how to get along and work through issues. At least that's what it looked like on the series. But if it's an experiment, my question is, why are we filming it? Any idea why he decided to have it filmed? In my mind, if it's an experiment, the filming would have altered the experiment. These people may act differently knowing they're being filmed, better or worse. So I just wanted you to know that I do admire the fact that he's trying to make things better, that he's trying to work through some of the issues that we see with this group and people who are in prison and try to help them make a better life for themselves down the road. But I just don't really understand what we're doing here. Why was it filmed? What was the whole point if no one got paid? What was the upside of, for filming it?
Sir, I can't answer that question. I'm the after effect guy.
Yes, sir.
The sole issue for the county judge's office is that there was an illegal contract executed, I don't know how that gets resolved.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm not trying to put you on the spot answering a question you
I'm
can't
not on
answer,
the
and I
spot
think we
at all.
agree on the
I'm not on the
contractual
spot
side
at
of it.
all.
Thank you.
Sure.
Senator Bryant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm right here in the middle.
Oh, thank you.
So the sheriff executed the contract, which was inappropriate or in violation of how we do business. So technically there was no legal contract for the show. Is that accurate?
It was illegal to sign that contract, and therefore there is not a valid contract in force.
Okay, so how is the county insured? Like if something were to have gone wrong, how would the county have held up on their liabilities?
So our insurance is through AAC, the Arkansas Association of Counties.
Okay, so you're part of a pool of our counties.
That's correct.
Do any of our other counties, have they reached out to you, any county judges reached out to you and expressed concern that you're potentially driving up their risk by these actions?
I'm not with that concern, no, sir.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and my friend from BB, Mr. Wooten.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge, it sounds like to me, this is going to sound like a wisecrack, and it is. Sounds like to me you need to get some bud snippers down there and snip this thing in the bud. When did you become aware that there was a contract?
I guess a week or two after that first trailer was advertised.
I didn't understand you.
I think it was a week or two after the first trailer was advertised on TV, I guess about.
You mean to tell me that that's been in place down there for 2 years and a contract had been signed and you didn't know it until the trailer ran?
Because the contract was not held by anybody other than the sheriff's office. It wasn't recorded in the clerk's office. It wasn't provided to the purchasing department. It was not provided to the county attorney's office.
How did the county attorney know about it?
A contract was submitted to the county attorney's office
2 years ago?
A couple of years ago.
When was the contract submitted to him? I thought you reviewed them all.
I review them after the county attorney, the purchasing department, and the comptroller review those agreements.
Well, how come you didn't review this contract? How could something $60,000 in value to the county go into effect and be utilized by the sheriff's department and you not know about it? If you review all the contracts and you said that you didn't know anything about it until the trailers ran, that's too late. Why the delay? That's 2 years after the fact.
Because it was a bad contract, so it was returned to the sheriff.
I'm not talking about I'm talking about your knowledge and your involvement and your duty and responsibility to the taxpayers of Pulaski County.
I don't think I understand exactly what you're asking me, sir.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think a law has been violated?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have you reported it to the prosecuting attorney and asked him to investigate?
Yes, sir.
And is he doing that?
It is my understanding they are.
You understand that you've turned it over to the prosecuting attorney and he's investigating it?
Yes, sir.
So on what basis then did you return the $60,000?
Because there was no basis to collect it.
On the basis, what basis did you use, or what are you saying? Are you saying you returned the $60,000 because the contract is illegal?
Yeah, there was no valid contract to credit that check to. And then in addition, the check was marked as being a reimbursement to the county from Lucky 8 Productions. And we have no record of expense. And the sheriff's office has said there was no additional expense incurred by the county to do this show.
So Lucky 8 spent all the money. Do you know if they paid those deputies that guarded that camera crew?
I have absolutely no idea.
You have no idea.
I don't know any more than the hearsay that you've got.
Well, I just find it hard to believe that type of a program was going on in the jail involving an outside media in the jail and being on the premises of county property, and you not know about it until the first trailer ran.
And I'm shocked as well, sir.
Well, who's in control down there? Is the sheriff running the show?
The sheriff is in control statutorily, is in control of the operation of the jail and an operation of the patrol division of the sheriff's department.
When did you make the quorum court aware that there was an illegal contract in place?
With the next meeting after we had seen the trailer.
Seeing the trailer?
Yes.
You made them aware then?
Yes. Well, they were.
What did they instruct you to do or ask you to do?
They asked to actually their coordinator to work with them on the questions that they wanted to ask the sheriff about how this show came about. And so they drafted 40 questions. I think it was 40 questions. They made the questions in the form of an ordinance, and they sent them to the sheriff and gave him, I think, 2 weeks to respond to answers with those questions.
Did the questions ever sent to the sheriff to answer from the quorum court?
The quorum court's questions were answered. I haven't read those answers. I haven't read that document. My understanding is that the response was nearly 400 pages.
Okay. If correct me if I'm wrong, and I may be, but I thought the sheriff said he talked to the city attorney or the county attorney, and the county attorney told him that it was all right to sign the contract.
No, sir. That I don't believe that's what the sheriff said. The sheriff said that he talked about doing a production like this with Lucky 8 Productions, and the sheriff told him, "I think I have the authority to be able to have these people in here, just like I have Channel 7 come and do a story about what we're doing in here." And the county attorney told him, "You operate the jail. You let people in and you let people out under your authority and your control. If that's what you want to do, then you can do that. But you can't bring me a bad contract and get me to recommend that it be signed by the county judge." So the show went on without a contract in place, just on the sheriff's verbal approval to come in and film this show.
Without a contract?
That's correct.
That's your, okay.
That's a fact, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Wooten, and I believe it's Representative Tara Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Judge Hyde, for being here today. I'm like some of my other colleagues. My questions were more so towards the sheriff, and it's unfortunate that he's not here today because I wanted to thank him for the work that he's doing. I am a correctional auditor, so I do audit jails and prisons. Some of the questions that I have, you may not be able to ask them, but first I'll start with, are you familiar with all the jail standards?
I am not.
Are you familiar with the staffing patterns at the jail?
Reasonably.
What do the staffing patterns look like as it relates to female to male ratio with the inmates?
I didn't catch the last part of that.
What's the ratio of guards to inmates and based on gender?
I can't tell you that exact number, but I can tell you that we don't have enough guards.
Okay. Another question that I have is there are about 125 jail standards that I've reviewed, maybe related to Arkansas. Those are not national standards. There are probably about 15 standards that are related to the safety and security of the operations of that jail. Also, it revealed that county officials receive inspections reports. Have you received the latest inspection reports as it relates to the county jail?
I have not received I don't think I've ever received a jail inspection report on the county jail. I received them on the juvenile detention facility because the juvenile detention facility in Pulaski County is run under my authority.
Okay, so you wouldn't necessarily need to know what was going on in the jail?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Shepherd. I don't see any other questions for the judge, so you're excused.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for being here today, Judge. And the committee, the next, I'm sorry. Did you have a question for the judge? The next would be Sterling Penix from the standards, jail standards, please. Mr. Penix here. And Mr. Penix, if you'd just raise your right hand and repeat after me. Testimony you're about to give, will it be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please take your seat. Welcome. And just push the button when the red light comes on. If you would, state your name and who you're with. There you go.
My name is Sterling Penix. I'm with the Detention Review Office. We operate at the Department of Public Safety. We report under the Commission on Law Enforcement Standards and Training.
Okay. And what can you explain the reason from a jail standards perspective why inmates are locked down for 23 hours and then 1 hour out?
Jail standards in Arkansas does not address that specifically. In general terms, due to classification, due to conduct, due to patterns of behavior, on occasion, the sheriff and the sheriff's team may opt to put someone in special housing, restrictive housing, or something along that line. That particular activity would be a local procedure coordinated at the county level. The review standards don't speak that specific into it.
Okay, and so do you have any knowledge of other detention facilities that have done a similar experiment such as this?
The review standards give a great deal of flexibility to the local sheriff and to the county in terms of housing, in terms of classification. And on occasion in the past, there have been programs filmed at jails here in Arkansas.
Okay, so during the filming of this experiment, did your staff do any inspections of the Pulaski County Detention Center?
To my understanding, based on the material, the program was filmed in March of 23, give or take a couple of weeks either way. The review team was there in November. We were there about 8 months after the filming.
Okay, so did you happen to have you watched the docuseries?
Yes, sir, I have.
So in your professional opinion, with jail standards, did you see any violations of the law that occurred?
Based on my review of the material, I do have concerns. We do have concerns based on standards. And we'll be going to the facility at the end of this month to follow up on those concerns and those areas that have captured our concern, which is based on the standards.
So in your inspections from jail standards, do you make no-notice inspections, or have you ever made a no-notice inspection on the Pulaski County Detention Center?
No, sir. We We almost always reach out to the command staff prior to our arrival. We typically call maybe 2 or 3 weeks in advance to schedule it and coordinate it. We typically want to speak with the sheriff or with the chief deputy, so we want to try to be there and try to catch them in the office and talk through activities and those type of things.
Okay, thank you. And Representative Tara Shepherd.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And over here, and it's great to see you again. It's been a while since we've seen each other.
Yes, ma'am. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, great to have you here. So since we're talking about standards, so which standard was there concern with?
One concern that we have is the duty to perform the hourly cell checks, and that will be an area that we'll be looking at to see if indeed those hourly cell checks were taking place. Also, we have some questions about policies and were those policies in place and those type of things. Those are some initial questions that we would have.
Specific to this pod that we're referencing.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so you all were there in November
Yes, ma'am.
for the audit.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you pass or fail them?
When we conducted the review last November, we found 2 areas that were of concern. One was with respect to staffing, and one with respect to space, which is somewhat common across Arkansas.
Absolutely. We know in correction there's a shortage of staff.
Yes, ma'am.
Did they fail or pass the inspection?
The review document does not speak in those terms.
Okay.
We do an evaluation of the site based on the standards.
Okay.
And with the last visit, there was no direct finding of noncompliance.
Okay.
There were only those 2 areas of concern.
Okay. So the areas of concern were areas that were not pretty much mandatory and they were out of compliance with.
It was the space and staffing. Those were the 2 items of concern. Yes, ma'am. And the standards are not really aggregated beyond that.
Okay. All right. Last question, Mr. Chair. Once the inspection reports are completed, who's provided a copy of those reports?
We will send a copy to the sheriff, to the county judge, to the county clerk, and also the administrative circuit judge.
Okay. So at that point, everyone you just named is familiar with what's going on with the day-to-day operations of the jail.
I apologize. I did not catch the first part of your question.
So at that point, everyone that you just mentioned is familiar with what's happening with the day-to-day operations of the jail.
That's our hope. We work to get those reports out to those individuals. At the same time, we realize that they're busy and receive a lot of correspondence and those type of things.
Thank you, and thank you for being here today.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Senator Bryant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a quick question on, at what point does, right here in the middle.
I'm sorry, apologize.
Does lack of adherence to jail standards correlate to an increased success of a lawsuit filed against the jail on behalf of an inmate?
And I apologize. Could you restate the first part of that question?
Yeah, what's the lack of adherence to jail standards? What correlation is that to increased success to a lawsuit?
That would be a fairly nuanced question, and that's a good question. I think on balance, what the courts could potentially look at would be the corrective action that's taking place to address a potential concern. Most of the literature that I've read in recent years speaks in terms of that. While that's a very good question, it falls outside the published standards, and it would be hard for me to speak beyond that.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And Senator, looks like Senator Love's up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In talking about those concerns, and I don't know personnel, because I've actually spoken with Sheriff Higgins on several occasions in regards to personnel, which, I mean, he has improved the number of personnel he has for jails, but, I mean, it's still lacking. And you stated that the county judge receives a copy of the reports that you have, and so I'm assuming that you stressed that there needs to be more personnel.
Yes, sir. In our most recent report, we had made a notation that the facility would benefit with respect to additional staff.
Okay, let me ask you this. Is there a response? Do you receive a response from the elected officials whom you give the reports to as in
No.
regards to how they're going to address?
Typically, we would engage directly with the sheriff and the sheriff's team as far as corrective measures, policy updates, those type of things.
Okay, has the sheriff indicated in the past that he's tried to get more personnel? Has that been one of his responses?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I guess, and so at that point in time, is there any elevation to the other elected officials in which you send the report to?
There could be. In working with a sheriff, if there is a concern or a potential concern, during those conversations and during those meetings, oftentimes we could, and we have in the past, reach out to the county judge, met with quorum courts. We would and have in the past presented before quorum courts, engaged the county judge, those type of things.
Okay, so in the past, have you all engaged the quorum court to express the need for additional personnel?
No, sir, I don't believe so. With respect to Pulaski County, all of our conversations have been with the sheriff and the sheriff's team, so far as I know and so far as I can remember.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Love. And Representative Flowers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi there. Hello, over here.
Yes, ma'am.
I have been listening intently and have learned a lot today. And I'm especially interested in your oversight as it relates to standards on these issues. And I heard you mention that you had watched the docuseries, which I have not watched it completely, and that there would be a visit and that you had several concerns. Then I heard you mention that there had been, I guess, a visit back in November, and that the only concerns that were documented were staffing and space. So what concern, do you have concerns outside of staffing and space at this juncture now that you have watched the docuseries?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you share? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am, I do have some concerns. The primary concern is during the time of this project, was the staff conducting their hourly cell checks? That is a primary concern we have at this moment. And in May, we'll be at the facility engaging with the command staff, having that conversation. Also, we'll have some questions about policy and any changes to policy and those type of things.
And just, I guess I'm wondering, as it relates to the conducting, what did you call it, hourly?
Cell checks.
Hourly cell checks.
Yes, ma'am.
And can that be done, or are those typically done in person by staff, especially given the staffing issues that we have really all across the state? And or could that be done via cameras? Or is that done often by cameras as well?
Yes, ma'am. What the standards look for is for staff to actually enter the housing unit at least once an hour and check on that space and check on the occupants.
And finally, we've heard a lot about facility safety, particularly for our deputies as well as for the inmates, and about recidivism, indirect versus direct supervision. Are there any standards that relate to those issues that we've heard about today that would cause you concern? And then also, do standards exist as it relates to the presence of media, whether it's for an interview or whether it's for something like this docuseries or for citizens in general? Maybe it just applies to citizens, but can you give us some insight as to what the standards say as it relates to that?
Yes, ma'am. The standards do not provide any specific language with respect to programs and services. There is a passage in standards that provides some very broad language. If a jail is to have programs, if a jail is to have services, there should be policies in place. As far as the actual specific procedures, that's organized at the county level by the sheriff and the sheriff's team.
So there wouldn't be anything for you to find in that area.
That's right. So we would not have jurisdiction on a particular program. We would not have jurisdiction on a particular service unless that program or service was to violate a particular standard. For example, a jail will have a visitation program or a visitation service. We look for that program and we look for that service to be there. At the same time, we don't show up and say, it's going to be Monday from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock.
Right.
It's going to be Thursday from 4 to 6. We look for that basic parameter, and the procedures are set at the local level by county sheriff and sheriff's team.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
And thank you to the sweetest, most honorable future mayor of Pine Bluff. And we are very proud of her. And Senator Bryant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Penix, as you watched that series, was there any concern about the cameramen inside the facility? Like, is there not a requirement for them to be escorted or conduct training for CJIS issues?
Yes, sir. At the end of May, when we get to the facility and conduct our follow-up, those will be some of the questions we will ask. Those are the questions we have as well, as far as any type of visitation policy or any type of change to the visitation policy. A jail could host perhaps a plumber or someone to do extermination services in a housing area. Typically, a county would have policy of how that particular professional will make their way about the facility. With a film crew example, we will have questions about what type of policies were in place that guided that particular process.
Okay. Do you know if it's legal or illegal to pay off-duty officers to conduct security for visitors in the jail?
That particular question would probably fall outside the scope of standards. I could certainly visit with the appropriate people and try to get you a good, strong response to that question.
Okay. I would appreciate it if you'd submit that to the chair.
Yes, sir. We'll be very happy to work on that.
Thank you, Senator Bryant. And Senator Chesterfield.
Mr. Chair, and good evening. How are you?
Fine, ma'am. How are you?
Would you agree that the vast majority of penal systems are understaffed?
As we travel Arkansas and look at county jails here in Arkansas, if there is a struggle, oftentimes it does pertain to low staff.
Mm-hmm. And so this is not unusual. Pulaski County is not something that's an outlier, because people simply are not rushing to get into law enforcement, are they?
Well, the standards don't necessarily speak to that, so I'm a little bit reluctant to...
But you've looked at the results, and you know very well that not a lot of folks are rushing.
I think it'd be fair to say that a lot of sheriffs around Arkansas, I think it would be fair and accurate to say that a lot of sheriffs around Arkansas are working really hard to recruit people and retain people. And I think if you were to visit with most sheriffs, I think most sheriffs would say that recruitment and retention is a big challenge.
Right.
And as I travel Arkansas, it looks as though, yes, it can be a challenge to recruit and retain staff.
As a matter of fact, I was in an event with Sheriff Higgins, 2 Saturdays ago, when he made a recruiting pitch. Three times. Please, you have graduated from college. Please come join us in the sheriff's department. I didn't see anybody rushing over to visit with him about that. But the pitch was there, and all we can do is ask. Is that not correct? You can recruit and recruit and recruit. These are very special people who wear these uniforms. And it takes a very special person to do that.
Yes.
And so it's very difficult sometimes to get people, especially good people who want to do this. But he's not an outlier in the fact that it's understaffed. Is that correct?
I have the honor of working with all the sheriffs in Arkansas. If a sheriff has a challenge, if a sheriff has a struggle, I think he or she would almost say every time, staff. It's a tremendous challenge to recruit and retain across the state.
And what was the other area other than the staffing? What was the other?
Space.
Space.
Yes, ma'am.
And I don't know the last time Pulaski County built a new facility.
I believe the most recent addition was constructed in 1994.
In 1994.
The other part, I believe, was built in 1974. I would need to check that, but I believe that's correct. 1974 and 1994. In more recent years, prior to my time, I think there was a renovation that gave way to some additional space.
But the personnel and the space are things over which really you don't have a lot of control. Is that correct?
Oftentimes, and this is outside the scope of standards, but oftentimes courtroom activity, arrest rates, those type of phenomenons can impact population and population activity.
Well, thank you for your objective response to my perhaps not so objective questions, but I think we need to know what we're dealing with, because I think in our county jails, in our city jails, in our state prisons, we're understaffed and we don't have the capacity. So we're going to have to do something, because we can't build our way out of this. And that's just one of the things I keep saying. And as I'm going home, I'm going to say it again. You can't build your way out of it because you cannot determine human behavior. And we don't know. All we can do is try to do the very best we can. Thank you so much again for being here. And thank you, Mr. Chair, again for allowing me to ask a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator Chesterfield. And we'll have one more, unless Senator Love, you're good. Okay. So Representative Tara Shepard, you're recognized, and we'll lock it down. Whoop. You hit your button again, please, Tara. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sterling, is the jail pre-accredited? Do you know?
I would have to check on that.
Okay.
That process and that decision is outside the scope of state standards. I know historically, Pulaski County has worked to implement a range of PREA protocols.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Shepard. And Mr. Pendix, thank you for being here. Appreciate your testimony. And unless there's any other business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No further business. This committee stands adjourned.